international.
Yo, chat.
We're
back.
Fisherman and professional sub-fanker.
Hey, race up. Thanks for the sub, dude.
Hit the big stage. 2025
Chat,
FNC's
y'all
program
got
was
shit on my
hosted in
cooking.
the
Look at
Reload
that.
Yeah,
mode
she knows how
where
to
20
fucking
teams
cook, chat.
consisting of one pro and one
Look at
content creator
that.
battled it out for
You know
their
what that
share
is,
of
chat? You know what that is?
$500,000.
I don't know
That's
why.
Step to
broccoli,
winning was simple.
green bell
Play
pepper,
with
onions,
Peterbot. Hope
rice,
you guys
and
enjoyed this video.
papas.
Now there are some accusations that potentially Ozzy has been carried
the
by
taste test.
Peterbot to this land win. He himself said it was all Peterbot. However, I'm here to say why that myth is both false and true. Ozzy and Peterbot land at Slurpy Swamp. Now there are actually around 4 teams surrounding them in total. To their east, they have Moxie and Cypher. To their north, they have Buddha and Typical Gamer. To the northwest, they have Mr. Savage, Lachlan, Seti, and Daya. And then to the south, they have Mongrel and Ali A.
What the f is this?
Now, being uncontested at Slurpy Swamps means that they have access to an insane amount of loot. But Reload...
That's fucking good. I low-key might make more.
Chat. We'll be playing with the thickest skin.
Respawn
in-game.
mechanic is really what their core strategy depends on, unsurprisingly. In the first game, as soon as Pete has a usable loadout, he has some materials, a mammoth pistol, a thunder pump, slurp juice, and then 2 different types of mobility. Pete sees a team fighting near him because he can hear the rift scoff, which means either teams are weak around him, or a player has just flown in with an AR and 100 HP, and this is a free elimination.
This
So
skin,
he
okay.
immediately uses as much of that double mobility item that he has to get over to this fight as fast as possible. Here he hits 2 pistol bangs onto Savage, shockwaves behind them, pistols them again, and wipes
putting
them out.
him.
But funnily enough, Ozzy was not useless here. He shockwaves up to help out as well, and ends up picking up an Elam onto Seti. So this is the first instance in this pro-am of a creator killing a pro. Let's go. Now, he did have no shotgun and no materials, but I'm not taking this away from him. This was a good Elam. Then when Mr. Savage respawns out of the sky, Pete can just chase him down because, again, this is a relatively free elimination.
Toyota.
So after
We love
Pete
Toyota.
manages to wipe out Savage for a second time, this is now 3 Elams and
I
3
got from my
elimination
seat,
points
okay.
since it's 1
Fuck yeah.
point per
Your
Elam.
girlfriend's hungry.
Now, if you look at the
Now you
point
baby.
format for this game mode, you'll realize this is the same as getting a top 8, which is pretty much like the last 2 or
Okay.
3 minutes of the game. So these
Queasy.
3 Elams were incredibly valuable, and all they needed to do was wait until a player respawned out of the sky and tried to farm them over again. A theme we will probably see a lot of.
Oh my
throughout
god,
this
chat.
video.
You know what's funny about this? When I went to the pro-am, that shit was funny as shit. I felt bad for Ali.
Stupid. Bro, we can find like 20 of these.
Now, of course, their drop spot of choice was Slurpy Swamp, and the strength of this cannot be understated. Mongrel and Ali, the hardest W keying team in the lobby, end up pushing in to grab a bunch of mats and extra loot. But since Pete has come back from third partying that fight, they get into a bit of a scrap. In almost the most heroic moment of the entire tournament, Ali A is a single bullet away from knocking Peterbot, which I would have loved to have seen the crowd's reaction to if he did. And honestly,
was because
he
of
probably
Bloom.
only did
You don't
heal
want
him here because of Bloom.
You want
He
more?
had 20 HP, he had a great AR, and if you watch it in slow motion, I'll be honest, Ali A probably should have got this Elam. But because Peterbot is so weak and he's been fighting the other teams, he has almost no materials. So Ozzy does a great job of
That would've been
creating a
funny.
bunch of
I remember,
space
'cause I saw
backwards,
that
which
shit and it was
allows
like,
Peterbot
damn.
to heal. Now, the beauty of Slurpy is the fact that there's just so many heals here. There are 4 slurp trucks and 176 slurp barrels.
That's what I love about
So
Slurpee,
including
bro.
the large slurp containers, this is 2,380 HP that each of these players can heal from barrels, forgetting all the slurp water that's around and the fact that both players can use these together. So since Pete almost died to Ali and Mongrel, he can then just use these to heal up and it's absolutely no problem. And these heals will become much more relevant in later games as well. Now, Ozzy's main role in this duo is to not milk and to put Peterbot into positions where he can succeed the most. Peterbot is the greatest player probably of all time, let's be real, and teaming up with him, you have to play to his strengths. So notice here how it's really early into the game and they've just made a rotate into zone and he splits him mat early. He is essentially loot llamaing Peterbot at this point, acknowledging that
Yeah.
if Ozzy milks and ends up dying early with a ton of mats, well, that means less for Peterbot. So at all points throughout these 6 games, he pretty much just continually splits him
forgot
mats
about
over and
Ali?
over again, which allows
Yeah.
Peterbot to get a bunch of solo clutches later on in the tournament. And his cons here are also very, very good. He's aware that he does not want to end up taking too much damage.
I'm just not gonna peek. I just don't want to milk our meds. I've only got this.
I'm not going to peek because I don't want to milk our meds.
Queasy,
many
Nick
different
830.
players in
Bro,
this
Queasy,
scenario would
when
just
he
take
won
damage back and then yes, you
the globals, I was fucking. I knew he was gonna win regardless because literally literally
early,
uncon
so
with the
Ozzy
best
didn't
medallion,
get
best
one. He
mythic,
gets an elim on a player
having
flying
the
out of
higher
sky.
odds
Now
of
he has
chances
two
of
elims,
winning
and
the
Pete has 2 elims as
the
well.
thing.
So yeah, he does
Oh,
ego
yeah.
check him a little bit.
Dude, 2-2, man. Come on, kill check by me. Come on, man. You gotta be at least triple my kills.
Now, I will be honest, he does absolutely milk this first game. He sees a body down on low ground, he runs for it, he doesn't protect himself whatsoever. He then gets up to a safe lair, and all he needs to do is edit a couple cones down to get back into Pete's box. But he's lost.
I would be
But he ends up
down to
going
play
down.
this shit.
Pete then frags it on low ground, gets completely
Nate
capped
Hill,
out
I forgot
by
about
two
Nate Hill,
bodies
chat.
to
Like
the
Nate
backside,
Hill was such
and
a
then,
good.
unfortunately, can't get out of the
I don't know
box.
if he was really
Now,
good
if
at the
I
game.
ever say I am the Scottish Peterbot, this is what I'm referring to. So in this first game, they got no placement points because they didn't get into a top 10 despite playing
Shax, you
out
just ate
the
all my
entire
food.
end game. But they got 6
I was
elims.
hungry.
Now,
It's
Aussie
okay,
is what we
baby.
like to call a glass cannon
Plus, you still
build.
have my big
Now, the definition for that
That's
is
your big
high
Mac.
damage output, but low defense / survivability. And I think that's
Okay,
a
I'm gonna do
perfect
an
way to
attack real
describe him.
fast.
Shout out to my boy Realms, who ended up saying this in my chat, which I've just absolutely stolen, but it's perfect. Sure, Aussie did die early in this game, but he got 2 elims, and there was only 3 other creators out of the 20 in the entire lobby who actually outfragged him, and there were 8 other creators who ended up dying before him. So in terms of his input, he was actually one of the highest input creators from this entire first match, despite the fact that they didn't actually get any placement points at all. But coming into game 2, they have a really
let's see where
interesting
they
strategy that again revolves around Reload's strange respawning mechanics. So Aussie Antics lands
Okay,
at
they
Slurpy
reroute.
Swamp, but Pete
Go this
lands
way.
at Dirty Docks. You see, the previous game's winners was 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 and Cooper, and they were in first place. So Pete ended up landing on them.
I forgot,
trying to
Scythe
kill
went
them.
against
Now, if
ZEMI
he's
at one point.
successful, he's able to get an
Or
elim
he-
or
he-
2
he
off
had
of
it
them
him
and maybe
added
scuff
or
up
some
their looting
shit.
path. And because there's so many other teams
that was
there,
so good, I
you might
want
get them
more.
stuck in a respawn loop where they're dying out the sky over and over, and then potentially just ruins the rest of their game, meaning they're not going to get as many points. But on the flip side, if Pete dies, then he's just going to respawn at Slurpy Swamp with nobody around him because they are uncontested here, meaning then he can just do his usual looting path. So it's a pretty zero risk play. But unfortunately, Aussie Antics lands on the top chest and dies to 𝕭𝑑𝖑𝖆, which means rather than Pete respawning at Slurpy Swamp, he respawns at Dirty Docks with a bunch of other teams, meaning he then gets stuck in a loop of continually respawning and dying out of the sky. Fortunately, he is able to glide back to Slurpy, and Pete comes with him as well, and then both of them are able to loot, because again, there's just so much shield and loot in this drop spot. Apparently, Aussie actually IGL'd this call to make Pete go and land on that team, which is the right play, just unfortunately he learned mid-tournament that landing on the top chest, probably not a good idea, and neither of them did this after this. But this game showed a lot of these strange quirks with actually how the LAN event was run. You see, these players don't use their regular normal accounts. They don't just sign in here on them. Instead, a new account is created for them, and all of the cosmetics and their name, etc. is transferred onto this temporary account used for the LAN.
yeah.
But when I say cosmetics, I really mean
Cosmetic.
because whatever the player's account had on them at the time that they had currently equipped, a bug forced the players not to be able to change their skins at all. So for example, if you saw a loser fruit skin, it was either going to be Alex or loser fruit. If you saw
Let's
a
go,
no
3
skin, that was probably going to be 𝕭𝖑𝖑𝖆 or 𝕭𝖑𝖆30 because their icon skins either didn't transfer over or they didn't want to wear them because they didn't want to get focused. And if you saw the 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 skin, unfortunately, that meant probably free elims. Now, he may have almost gotten the elim onto Peterbot in game number 1, but that was not going to be the trend going forward. Peterbot notices that it's him and Mongrel rotating to the south of him and shockwaves onto them. Now, he full boxes 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆, and I'll be honest, this is probably one of the longest wall sniffs I have ever seen. Then, because Mongrel's a solo, Peterbot can just chase him over and over again, and he gets a really nice elim on him, getting completely capped max. Now, you may be asking, what was Aussie doing at this time? Well, this is where the anchor strategy comes in. In these early fights,
Honestly,
Aussie is just
chat, I
reharvesting
might
materials,
go with the
getting a bunch of
fireworks
extra loot and whatnot, and if Peterbot dies when he's W-keying one of these teams, he's just going to safely respawn in Slurpy, where he can just instantly get stacked again. Now, it may seem like
yeah,
Aussie
this
doing
side,
nothing,
and then
but
you
getting a
just
ton of
rotate
mats,
from here,
getting a
yeah.
ton of loot, not dying, and giving Peterbot a safe space to respawn to farm a bunch of early elims was a core part of their strategy. Now, if you're going to play with Peterbot, you have to be confident. You have to match his style of play, or else you're just not going to blend well. And Aussie has confidence, I can tell you that much. 𝕭𝑒 and Jacob rotate into
Oh yeah,
Slurpy
𝕭𝑒,
Swamp
bro. You gotta
and
love
box up
𝕭𝑒.
them. And with 0 damage
𝕭𝑒 and
dealt
Seti,
by Aussie
top
or
tier
Peterbot
players.
onto this duo, listen to the call.
Maybe we can shockwave in, bro. It's up to you.
Nah.
Nah, okay.
Unreal. Cinematic. That was one of my favorite moments for the entire tournament. Then they build across them, and Pete says we can jump in. And with no hesitation, 𝕭𝖊𝖑 just follows him, jumps in, and actually picks up the 𝕊𝖊𝖑 onto Jacob. Now, this is actually quite important because had 𝕊𝖑𝖑𝖆 just jumped in, 𝐾𝑎𝑚𝑖 would have gone into a 1v1 with him because they had the wall between them. But because 𝕭𝖊𝖑 dropped down, grabbed the wall, this actually scared off 𝐾𝑎𝑚𝑖, meaning that they didn't risk dying here at all. Now, comes to the end game. He may have milked a second time, but he did drop Pete capped mats again, and this is definitely where the Aussies just doing a viewing party on LAN accusations did start to come in. However, when he's dead, he just calms the really important things like materials left, and he marks every single zone. He's not annoying, he doesn't scream and shout, he doesn't do anything to distract 𝕊𝖑𝖆. He's basically the perfect dead player, if that makes sense.
That's
Then Pete
fun.
as a solo is able to get up to a top 4, gets an 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆, but unfortunately there's no siphon in reload, even in reload tournaments, so he immediately dies. Now after these first 2 games, they're up in 5th place out of 20 teams with 4 games remaining. Now, the replays for this event were entirely broken, so I wouldn't even be able to make this video if it wasn't for 𝕭𝐴𝑠𝑖RIAN, who basically recreated replays that I'd be able to record from. So big shout out to them. Not a sponsor, but without them, this video would be much worse. Go follow, links down below. Game
I need
3,
to
I'll be honest,
follow them,
there's
man.
not that much to talk about. They got a bunch of max zones, and they used all of their mobility early, and then Pete just had a grappler, so he couldn't actually help 𝕭𝖊𝖑 rotate whatsoever. So 𝕭𝖊𝖑 just split him his mats and just said, sayonara, good luck, solo. So you know what? He knew his place. He was loot lama in this. But unfortunately, Pete only was able to solo clutch up to a top 10, which again is only halfway through the lobby. So they ended up dropping from 5th place down to 7th. But the next game would not be so uneventful. This was probably the most entertaining game of the entire weekend. And it was all thanks to 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆. Now at the start, 𝕭𝖊𝖑 makes a call that he should W-key 𝕭𝑊𝑘ey, who is struggling to
Yeah,
get
right now.
east.
Dude, I swear we can look at PK though, bro. PK
Down.
goes on slurp
That's where I'm about to go. That's where I'm about to go.
Unfortunately, he
Nobody's on.
doesn't say to the east, and 𝕊𝖑𝖆𝖑 doesn't actually know the teams that are landing around him. So he W-keys to the north, and he comes
might have to
across
remove some
𝕭𝖑𝖆
people,
and
chat.
TG. Now, after hitting a couple shots for around 50 to 100 damage onto TG, he starts to W-key him, and he gets full pieced by TG in a phenomenal moment.
Wait, I thought it was. Oh.
PK is to the east, bro. You got a full key east for PK if you want to get that team.
Okay.
But again, because it's reload, he then respawns inside of 𝕭𝑃𝖑𝖆, dies once out of the sky, then 𝕭𝖊𝖑 makes a good play to go inside of the main building where the roof is higher, which allows Pete to actually drop down safely, and then because of the slurp, he can just basically get instantly healed up again, and then they can just continue to play out the rest of the match. So 𝕭𝖊𝖑's role here as the anchor to always allow him for around 50 to 100 damage onto TG, he starts to W-key him, and he gets full pieced by TG in a phenomenal moment.
Wait, I thought it was. Oh.
PK is to the east, bro. You got a full key east for PK if you want to get that team.
Okay.
But again, because it's reload, he then respawns inside of 𝕭𝑃𝖑𝖆, dies once out of the sky, then 𝕭𝖊𝖑 makes a good play to go inside of the main building where the roof is higher, which allows Pete to actually drop down safely, and then because of the slurp, he can just basically get instantly healed up again, and then they can just continue to play out the rest of the match. So 𝕭𝖊𝑑's role here as the anchor to always allow Pete to W-key comes in very clutch. Then again, later into this game, they spot 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆. Now again, because it's just the 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆 skin, you know, unfortunately, he is the worst player in the lobby and is going to be very easy to 𝕊𝖊𝖑. So after Pete gets an 𝕊𝖊𝖑 onto him, they build up onto a hill right next to him,
No. Okay, listen.
Yep.
We're going on this hill. We're farming it.
and 𝕭𝖒𝑚ongrel is sitting below the hill, basically unable to move. This means that 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆 repeatedly spawns out of the sky and dies over and over and over and over. I could keep going again. His
Jesus.
reactions, quite funny, I will say.
What the f is this? This is stupid! Let me change my skin so people stop farming me, bro!
But all of a sudden, every stream from inside the venue went down.
Yeah.
The main broadcast went down, the players' individual streams paused, all of the co-streamers went down, and basically the only person live inside was 𝕭𝑘𝖆 from his phone. Now, there were
Yeah.
many theories on what was going on in the middle of this match. Main one being that the IP address for the building was leaked,
Alright,
and
I'm
then
gonna do my
𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆
last attack.
DDoSed it to shut it down so that he could stop dying over and over again.
This is the game we needed, bro. This is the game we needed. 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆, I'm so sorry wherever you are, man.
Unfortunately, it was just a regular power cut to the entire campus area, which basically just stopped the match. This meant that the 6 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆s that Pete and 𝕭𝖊𝖑 had already gotten at this point were completely null and void. And remember, 6 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆s is a massive swing in the overall
What?
leaderboard, given it's 10 points for a win. So with the
Yeah,
game
what?
cancelled, it has to be restarted, but
Excuse
the
me?
real game number 4 did have a bit of a similar trend
Yeah.
to what we just saw. Mongrel tried to do the same split-off spawn strategy that Pete and Ozzy did in game number 2, this time
Why?
trying to land on the Frenchies up to the north. Unfortunately, he
Oh
got
my
no
God.
elims and died. So that means when he respawned on Alley A to the south, he immediately heard that. So at this point, Ozzy made a great play to drop all of his materials and all of the good weapons he had to Pete so that he could go and W key the team while he kept farming. Pete then is able to re-even Mongrel again and leaves Alley A alive so he can try to farm Mongrel out of the sky. However, Mongrel flies into Slurpee where Ozzy is, and Ozzy again makes the big confidence play. He W keys him, chases him into the bottom of a building, shockwaves in, and manages to elim Mongrel. So now he's got
No, I
two
heard what you
pro-elims to
said.
his name. Then after
Why?
respawning,
Why you do, baby?
Mongrel classics Mongrel, which is a little bit insulting, I'll be honest. So this game, not only is Ozzy doing a great job of allowing Peterbot to continually respawn in Slurpee and be safe, he's also just W keying pros confidently and shockwaving in their box. So with a couple early elims, they decide to stay in Slurpee Swamp and get as stacked on their materials as they possibly can. Now, throughout this tournament, Ozzy's RNG hasn't been really that great when it comes to weapons. He always does grey and green, and he was complaining a lot about it through all of the matches, until this.
Oh my god, it's great. Oh no, it's not even a friggin' dude.
I got the pulse rifle.
Wait, the pulse rifle?
Yeah.
Yo,
we
okay.
win.
Now, the overclocked pulse rifle is the highest damage per second of any assault rifle, being 237.5 damage per second, and giving it to Pete is kind of unfair. He also pulled a really good Slurpee zone this game, which allowed Pete to go up on top of the building and just spray everyone on rotate. At this time, Ozzy was sitting down below, refarming as many materials as possible to keep them as stacked as they could. Now, Ozzy's main job in this is to stay alive. He has milked 3 end games so far, 2.5 we'll say, because the previous one wasn't really his fault, they just didn't have any mobility, and all of the previous 3 winners of the games had both the pro player and the content creator alive to the end. Essentially, if you manage to keep both players alive right...
I heard what you said. Baby. Baby. I heard what you said. You're not talking to a wall. She got kicked out because she went to the boys. She got one of the bitch. Just double check. No, why? Why do you do that? It's not. You know that's not fair, right?
That's what you think? No, okay. Give me the knife. Give me the knife. Hurry up, come on. I want dinner. I'm hungry.
there for a minute.
Chat, we're making dinner. Hold your fucking peas.
Oh wait, I paused the video? Oh no. Give me a second, kid. I apologize for the outburst.
Into the end of the game, your chances of winning skyrocket. And by playing height the entire game, they managed this incredibly well. The final 4 players in this match were 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆, Cold, Cooper, and 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖑𝖆. And with some beautiful shots from the pulse rifle, 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 was able to wipe out Cooper and win the game. So yes, this means that 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 finally has a victory royale at an international LAN. It's not Muzz, it's not Alex, it is 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖑𝖆. Let's go. With this win, they're now up into second, only being 3 points behind Cooper and 𝕊𝑑𝖆 in first. Now, I will be honest, he glass cannons the last 2 games, dies early, and basically only played 1 endgame out of 6. But 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 was able to clutch up a top 5 finish in both of these last 2 games, enough just to let them win over Cooper and 𝕊𝑑𝖆. But it wasn't their endgames and placement that won them the tournament. Remember, this format was still really reliant on elims, and out of the teams who placed in the top 5, they actually had the lowest placement points, being only 30. But it's the elims where they made up the difference. They had 41 elims total, but the next highest team was Somerset and Thomas HD in 7th, where they got 27. Now, Ozzy's role in these elims was incredibly important. Outside of game 2, where he died out of the sky and then got farmed a little on respawn, he did not die in respawn once, whilst 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 was out farming kills on players around them. Sure, 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 did the heavy lifting, but Ozzy was reliable, confident, and definitely downplayed his own part because he died in every single endgame, but he was incredibly important in winning this tournament, and of course, being the first LAN winner from OCE, and therefore, OCE's best player. Now, if you want to see how I became Scotland's best Fortnite player for 6 days, you can click on this video right here.
They start making podcasts.
And subscribe.
Sage and Devin. These two, they still make videos on their own.
Mythics, exotics, and medallions are the most broken items in Fortnite. So why do mythic drop spots only account for 21% of FNCS major wins? When I refer to a mythic drop, I'm defining these as drop spots that hold a mythic item, an exotic item, or a medallion that isn't available anywhere else. These drops give players landing here massive advantages of teams who just drop at other POIs, and this logic never really made that much sense to me. Since the best players will nearly always land at the best drop spots, giving them better loot than anyone else makes them even harder to beat. Look at any high elimination solo cash cup opens game, and the players dropping 20 plus elims nearly always have mythics, exotics, and a medallion, which makes them close to unkillable. But looking at the history of FNCS wins, it's clearly not quite as simple as that. The first competitive season that featured mythics was Chapter 2 Season 2 at the start of 2020, and some of these were insanely powerful. Sky's assault rifle was found by defeating the Sky boss at the Shark. Now, it dealt 1 more damage per shot than the gold rarity, but it also had a slightly higher fire rate. This meant that it dealt 222 damage per second in comparison to 198 of the gold, which is an increase in damage per second of 12%. Sky also dropped an infinite use grappler, and in a meta where almost every other player either had no mobility or just used launch pads, having an infinite mobility item was insanely strong. So surely with all of these advantages of this drop spot, players landing here won the FNCS? Well, no, not even close actually. On EU and on NA, both regions were won by teams who landed at Sweaty Sands, which was not a mythic drop spot. And if you remember this season well, there were also 4 other mythic drop spots, and on EU, the highest placing team dropping a mythic drop spot was actually 4th, which was Aqua and Stompy, who landed at the Grotto, who used the mythic minigun. So despite all of the mythic's massive advantages, no team podiumed from one of these spots. Interestingly, this season was insanely long, so it actually ended up having 2 FNCSs in it, the main duo FNCS, and then an invitational solo event. You'd think that the Shark loot would be even stronger here since the Grappler is even better in solos. However, Janice won EU from Steamy Stacks, and Furious won NA from Lazy Lake. Again, neither of these mythic POIs in a season dominated by very overpowered items. All of these drop spots have a massive problem, as people just don't give them up for free. The next season in Chapter 2, Season 3 was actually a really good example of this. This was a solo season of FNCS, and similar to the previous season, it had multiple strong mythic drop spots. By far, the most overpowered in solos was Catty Corner. Similar to the Shark in the previous season, this had both a crazy weapon, Kit's charged shotgun, and a crazy mobility item, which was Kit's shockwave launcher. Most players in the lobby were rotating using crash pads or launch pads, so having a shockwave launcher with 18 max shockwaves was obviously very powerful. Killing the player who was carrying this loot was so good that in the first game, Flois, who was able to do this, ended up winning the match. Now at Catty Corner, Thomas HD was one of the players fighting for this loot, and surprisingly, there were also a lot of other players landing here too. Since the boss took time to eliminate, there were also a lot of players landing around and third partying, so despite all of the advantages of the loot and Thomas being a great solo player, he ended up 18th. On the other side, Tayson, who won the event, was landing at the Orchard completely uncontested. This spot has a lot of loot and good positioning, but there wasn't really anything special about this drop spot outside of the fact that he was uncontested. So despite all of these strong mythics in the meta, there were no FNCS wins from a mythic POI in the entire of Chapter 2 on the major regions EU and NA. But I'll touch more on that later. So the first FNCS win with a mythic was Peterbot and Byla in Chapter 3 Season 2 on NA. They had access to Sloan's Striker Burst Rifle, and with Pete's aim, it's safe to say that helped them a lot with Storm Surge. But honestly, if you watched throughout this tournament, it's not like there were 1,000 above Storm Surge every single game. There were multiple matches where they were below, so yes, this mythic was strong, but it didn't win FNCS for them. Now, if I'd uploaded this exact video at the end of Chapter 3, the conclusion would have been that mythics don't matter at all. Not a single team has won an FNCS from a mythic drop spot on EU, only one has won on NA, and Kamen Seti won the FNCS Invitational LAN from a gas station. Unsurprisingly, not a mythic gas station. But Chapter 4, more exotics were added into competitive, not just mythic items. Prior to this, exotic items had mainly just been kept in public matches, but the most impactful addition was probably the heisted Breacher Shotgun. At this time, it dealt 759 structure damage for whatever reason, meaning it could one-shot any player-built structure. This wasn't found in a specific drop spot, but instead was found in hollow chests spread throughout the map. Since you had to get keys to access these, this meant that it wasn't just a couple of drop spots that had access to these. Now, as I covered in my previous video, the story of 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆, he and 𝕭𝖃 used the heisted Breacher Shotgun in combination with the mythic Flapjack Rifle, which was found at their drop spot, to be the first team to win an FNCS from a mythic drop in EU. However, something that differentiated the drop that they landed at from other mythic POIs is that this was actually a split drop. Now, historically, mythic bosses are found in POIs. However, this season, the mythic was found in a vault, which was in a split under a little castle. Now, split drops are much more difficult to contest off spawn, and good teams often tend to just want to land at a POI instead, usually because there is more loot. So this left 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 and 𝕭𝖃 to grab the vault, get the mythic Flapjack, and then in games where it spawned, also get the heisted Breacher Shotgun, and then win FNCS. Now, Epic Games also experimented more with the mid-game objectives this chapter generally, and with Loot Island spawning in the mid-game, they first rewarded players going for this with the overclocked Pulse Rifle. Now, this gun is arguably the strongest assault rifle ever added to Fortnite. Whilst hip firing, it deals 237 damage per second, and whilst ADSing, the damage per shot increases from 38 to 57 a body shot, so this was good at every range. Now, most players were carrying the Red Eye assault rifle this season, and the gold deals 140 damage per second. The overclocked pulse rifle is 237.5 hip fire and 199.5 ADS. So whilst ADSing, this deals 42.5% more damage per second, and whilst hip firing, this is 69% nice more damage per second, and it's more accurate. So it's safe to say this is a massive buff over any other rifle. For the entire of the season in EU, 𝕊𝖑𝖑𝖆 and Thomas HD were fighting for the island every single match of every single tournament, and they had a relatively free time claiming it. Because of this, they were predicted as heavy favourites to win the FNCS Major in Europe, but come to the FNCS Finals, they weren't given that same respect, so died in a lot of matches. Even if they did make it off spawn, there were so many teams fighting for Ireland every single match. Unsurprisingly, with 3 to 4 teams fighting for the Pulse Rifle every game, almost none of the teams going for it did well. To contrast this season was dominated by 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆's 6 out of 12 wins, and the only time they went for Ireland across this was in Game 9, when 𝕭𝖊𝖑 basically had already won the tournament and started to troll. Chapter 4 Global Championships was also won by �㈽𝑎 and 𝕊𝑚iro, who landed at Rumbled Ruins. Now this POI had no mythic, and honestly, it was pretty awful generally. It basically barely even had metal. The only real redeeming quality is that it was in the center of the map, and there were teams that they could trade Surge with. So by the end of Chapter 4, there were only 2 mythic wins out of 38 events. But, of course, all of this would start to change in Chapter 5. Across EU, NA, and the Global Championship, there was only one FNCS that was not won by a team landing at a mythic drop spot. And unsurprisingly, this is also the chapter that introduced medallions. Now, in the first season, every medallion was the same. They infinitely recharged the holder's shields, and the more medallions that player carried, the faster their shield regeneration, and the higher total amount of shields it could recharge. Not only that, they had access to a huge amount of gold, which was in the vault of these POIs, which could only be opened by a medallion holder, and then they could use this gold to mod their other weapons. Now, if medallions took up an inventory slot, they would be still incredibly broken, but since they don't, not only do they have the infinite shield effect, but now they also don't have to carry as many heals. So this meant that it was much easier for mythic teams to also carry sniper rifles. For 𝕊𝖑𝖑𝖆 and 𝕭𝑚 who won EU, they were carrying a sniper basically every single game, and it was actually a huge part of their strategy. Now, the mythic that they got was Nisha's Striker Assault Rifle. In comparison to the gold, it deals 1 more damage per shot, but this means that the damage per second is around 3.5% better. This is obviously a massive difference from the 12% increase of the Sky's Assault Rifle and the 42% increase on the Overclocked Pulse Rifle. When you go up from one rarity to the next, usually your damage per second will increase somewhere between 3 to 6%. Now, on average, in an FNCS lobby, most players are probably going to carry a blue rarity assault rifle, so this means that teams with mythic weapons can deal around 16% more damage per second than everyone else. What's also important to remember is that higher rarities often have less bloom and recoil, so these effects compound as the guns deal more damage and they're easier to hit shots with. So this season, mythic drop spot teams had a mythic which is around 16% better than everyone else, a medallion which infinitely recharges their shield, a bunker with gold and weapon mods, and the ability to carry more weapons like sniper rifles because the medallion doesn't take up an inventory slot. It's unsurprising that so many teams landing at mythic drop spots won FNCSs across Chapter 5, with the only team not landing at a mythic drop spot to win an FNCS being 𝕊𝑑𝑒 and 𝕭𝑗𝐶 in Season 3. However, they did land at Reckless Railway, which gave them access to the forecast tower to see where every single zone is. It's not like this drop didn't also have massive benefits. Now, Chapter 6 nerfed medallions a lot by pretty much just keeping them to 1 drop spot and 1 mid-game objective for the first 3 seasons, so it's unsurprising that the amount of wins from mythic drop spots ended up decreasing. But yet again, the power of the mythic drop spots wasn't really anything to do with the mythic. 𝕊𝑑𝑒, who landed at Crime City, was able to get the train every single game, which gave him access to the mythic pump. Now, obviously, the mythic pump in the hands of 𝕊𝑑𝑒, that is pretty broken, but the main benefit of this is actually the fact that they got a ton of gold from this. They're also able to get the gold from the vault in the drop spot, which meant they could go to the black market and get any heals or weapon upgrades that they wanted. Now, Pete did land at Boxcars the next season, and you may say this isn't a mythic drop spot, and I could half agree with you. However, they did have these spires here, which gave them unstable exotic items. One of these was basically a gold pump with some movement modifiers. Another one was the Hyperburst pistol, which shot shockwave grenades, and the other one was the Outlaw shotgun, which pulled players towards you. Generally, this chapter, mythic drop spots just had been nerfed massively, and that's why they didn't really play much of a role in who's winning FNCS anymore, which was all true until the Global Championships, where they reintroduced the bunkers. Now, I'm not going to go over this too much, but players landing at mythic drop spots also got access to the mid-game bunkers, which gave them exotics. So these players had medallions, which most of them dropped because they didn't want to be seen on the map, mythics, exotics, and tons more heals and metal to refarm. With all these buffs, it's unsurprising that 𝕭𝑗𝐶, 𝕭𝑚, and 𝕭𝑚 won the FNCS Global Championship, but if you want to learn more about that specifically, I'll link this at the end of the video. But outside of being a mythic drop spot, there's one thing that's actually a much bigger indicator if someone's going to win an FNCS. Out of the 24 FNCS majors in EU, only 1 has ever been won by a contested team. In Chapter 2 Season 4, 𝕭𝑗𝑐, 𝕭𝑚, and 𝕊𝑑𝑒 were relatively uncontested at Stark Industries on day 1, but were contested by multiple teams on day 2. Since it was the best drop spot of the season, teams who were underperforming moved to land here to increase their chances of winning. Now they won with 194 points, but actually got 131 of these on day 1 and only 63 on day 2 when they were contested. What makes this even more insane is that there were only 5 games on day 1 and 7 on day 2 due to a bug. This means that on day 1 they averaged 26.2 points a game while uncontested, and then only 9 points per game while contested. Flick, Anas and Thomas HD were the ones to contest them, and by moving from Dirty Docks and winning off spawn against 𝕭𝖒𝖆's team, they were able to go from 15th all the way up to 3rd place. So technically Tayson's team were able to win an FNCS while contested, but really it was only for 4 games, and the leaderboard might have looked very different if they were actually contested for the entire tournament. Similarly, on NA, the only team to win an FNCS while contested was 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖑𝖆 and Jukes in Chapter 4 Season 2. However, there were some accusations about this win. They absolutely wiped the floor with 𝐷𝑠malls and Diego, who contested them. 12-0. They beat them so bad, people started to ask if they were being fed eliminations. Now, I don't think they were, but they still only won the tournament by 33 points. So if they'd lost a single one of these off spawns, they probably would not have won FNCS. Now, other FNCSs were won by teams who were technically contested, but these teams split a drop spot and then didn't fight in the majority of their games. So by looking at the history of FNCS wins, it's very clear that mythics by themselves are not that overpowered, but it's the combination of mythics, medallions, exotics, and exclusive mid-game opportunities for these teams that make a mythic drop spot truly busted. As I was making this video, Epic removed all mythics, exotics, and medallions from competitive, so clearly they knew that people didn't really enjoy this gameplay loop. However, clear that the most important part of winning an FNCS is just literally not being contested off spawn and fighting every game. Now, if you want to watch how Fortnite's unluckiest player became a world champion and learn about probably the most broken mythic drop spot of all time, you can click on this video on screen right now. In the final game of the biggest Fortnite tournament of 2022, �ㄫ𝖊𝖑𝖆 and 𝕊𝖑𝖆 unexpectedly switched their drop spot up to land on the current first place team, 𝐾𝐴MI and 𝐶𝑒.
What is this? What is this? �ㄫ𝖊𝖑𝖆, 𝕊𝖑𝖆 are trying to take it by force!
If they win the fight, they win the entire event.
We'll only win in one way, and that's taking that crown! 𝕊𝖑𝖆 is here!
The first mistake.
𝕊𝖑𝖆 is here! Down goes 𝐶𝑒! It's a big trade! It's a one-on-one!
He's trying to bait it. He's trying to bait the revive so that way 𝐾𝐴MI might peek.
The second mistake.
Break through the wall.
Shot's gonna be fired! And they do it!
In the lead up to this event, �ㄫ𝖊𝖑𝖆 and 𝕊𝖑𝖆 were undoubtedly the favourites to win it all, and this wasn't the first time that they had fallen at the last hurdle. In the first year or two of Fortnite's release, there was really no competitive structure or practice for players to start improving and getting better. All there were zone rule scrims where you weren't allowed to fight until a certain point of the game. These were often considered horrible, atrocious, unrealistic practice, but this is where �ㄫ𝖊𝖑𝖆 developed a ton of the fundamentals that he knows to this day.
Like I was playing like all the time before, like Arabic customs every single day, like 10+ hours we just played duo scrims.
This meant by the time he got to his first FNCS finals in Chapter 2 Season 2 back in 2020, he was already an extremely smart and proficient player. Teaming up with 𝕭𝖃 at the time, in their first FNCS Grand Finals, the biggest tournament of the season, they ended up with a 2nd place finish, just narrowly missing out on the championship title. An extremely impressive performance for his first final, but it wasn't a win. Across the next few seasons, the game mode changed from duos to solos, and then officially to trios. Despite making the FNCS finals in every one of these seasons, he wasn't able to consistently place in the top 10, largely due to not having great synergy with the teammates, and having a particularly bad mentality in solos.
I got sniped twice! I got sniped!
That was until Chapter 2 Season 6, where he re-teamed up with 𝕭𝖃 and added 𝕭𝑠uriki to the mix. �㫫𝖃 and 𝕭𝖃 have already played so many games together that their synergy was unmatched, and in their search for a 3rd player to play with, they had offers from some of the biggest names in the region, but they knew what their team required.
And that same season also we got DMs, me and 𝕭𝖃 got DMs from like Tayson and 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆, and we decided to like just play with 𝕭𝑠uriki because like he was like the best free builder 1v1 creative player back then, and that's what we needed. And our goal in our head when we wanted to play, we were like, we need this guy. He's gonna be cranking sky limit for height like every single game. And me and 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 are just gonna go front and spray, and we're gonna win every game.
They may not have been able to win every game, but they did manage to win 3 of the 12 matches across the weekend, and clearly their confidence in picking up an at the time more unknown player paid off. After narrowly missing out on an FNCS championship by placing second 1 year prior, 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 had now won his first major Fortnite tournament and was now a one-time FNCS champion. However, as is very common with FNCS championship winning teams, once they've achieved their target, they struggle the next season to continue that grind. They end up placing 15th out of 33 teams and decide it's best to split as a trio. But it wasn't all bad. 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 ended up then teaming up with Thomas HD and 𝕭𝖃, 2 of the best players in Europe. Yet again, they were predicted as a top team to win it all, and come the Grand Royale, the final tournament of 2021 and Chapter 2, they won the final game with 14 eliminations, unfortunately only placing 3rd overall in the leaderboards, narrowly missing out on the championship title for a second time. But this was a good lesson learned about hard work.
Everyone in that trio, we worked hard, and like, obviously not hard enough because like we didn't win.
𝕊𝖃𝖆's story across this time had a lot of similarities. The world really started to learn his name around Chapter 2 Season 7, mid-2021, when he started working in Fortnite coach Destiny Jesus' friend group. Now, self-admittedly, DJ says that even coming into this group, 𝕊𝖃𝖆 was already a phenomenal solo player, and it only helped him a small amount. He was an extremely talented player, yet was never able to showcase this in a major tournament. However, with DJ's coaching, combined with a friend group of some of the best players in the region, that was all about to change. In the last game of the finals, the entire championship would depend on the final 1v1 between 2 members of that coaching group, 𝕊𝖃𝖆 and the GOAT of competitive Fortnite, 𝕊𝖃. Whoever wins the 1v1 wins the tournament.
Have to be 𝕊𝖃𝖆 going for the win right now in order to catch up. He's going for 𝕭𝖃𝖆 as well. If he gets 3, that could be it. He's moving forward, forcing the placement. 𝕊𝖃 on all.
He misses the final shot. And let me, from 2021, tell you exactly why that shot was so important.
He completely ended up whiffing, and that was a $30,000 shot.
With Fortnite Chapter 2 coming to an end, Epic Games announced that Trios was no longer going to be the main competitive mode, and instead, the main mode for Chapter 3 would be Duos. Since 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 had clearly established himself as one of the best in-game leaders in Fortnite, this gave him a large amount of options for picking up a fragger duo.
Me and 𝕃𝖃𝖆 were gonna play the first season duos, but I decided to go with hand. In my head, 𝕃𝖃𝖆 wasn't good enough. But like, he didn't have the placements to prove it, you know? But I knew he was good. Like, in my head, like, it was either him or Han, but Han had the placements to prove it, so I decided to go with Han.
And this seemed to be the right call. Their playstyle was extremely height dominant, and very similar to the playstyle that won 𝕊𝖃𝖆 the FNCS in Chapter 2 Season 6. They would go on to dominate Chapter 3 Season 1, and it all came down to a final solo clutch that Hen had to pull out in order to win the entire tournament.
Hen has it! 1v1, 297 points. This is for the European Championship. All you have to do is take down walks, solidify it. He has enough points already, but do it in style, my friend. The VR is just in your grasp. Hen as a solo against the world, and he wins the European FNCS.
But all good things must come to an end. In the next season, Chapter 3 Season 2, 𝕊𝖃𝖆, who many people considered the best height player, returned to competing, picking up 𝕊𝖃𝖆 as his duo. There's only room for one team on top of the lobby, and 𝕊𝖃𝖆's style of taking it was incredibly aggressive, often just 50-50ing whoever was there. This very aggressive strategy won them 2 of the 6 games on the first day. Unfortunately for 𝕊𝖃𝖆 and Hen, since they hadn't practiced this much this season, a massive change in removing the cars midway through FNCS meant they really struggled with far zones as they hadn't practiced these. And even when they did have a good game, 𝕊𝖃𝖆 and 𝕊𝖃𝖆 outclassed them on height. They ended day 1 in 41st place.
Yikes!
𝕊𝖃𝖆 and 𝕊𝖃𝖆 topped the leaderboards. They did have one of the best comebacks on day 2, firing all the way up to the 8th place on the leaderboard. However, still not a stellar finish for 2 previous season's champions. And no surprise, the team at the top of the leaderboard were the other height dominant team, 𝕊𝖃𝖆 and 𝕊𝖃𝖆. But to everyone's surprise, this duo would split in the next season. The reason 𝕊𝖃𝖆 had initially quit is because he repeatedly had a bunch of hand and wrist issues, which meant that he wasn't able to play the game for extended periods of time without lots of pain. To coincide with this, after the disappointing finish of placing 8th amongst a host of other personal reasons, Hen and �ㄐ𝖊𝖑𝖆 also split, with �㐐𝖊𝖑𝖆 looking for a new fragger. Personally, I thought I was the best in the world, but apparently I wasn't the best option.
I was actually gonna go play with 𝕭𝑑𝖑𝖆. When we like decided to play, I was literally on Twitter making a tweet, �㐐𝖊𝖑𝖆 x 𝕭𝑑𝖑𝖆, shifty shafts all season or whatever. And then I got a DM from 𝕊𝖑𝖆 like, yo, are we playing? And I was like in call with 𝕭𝑑𝖑𝖆. I was like, well, I just got a DM from 𝕊𝖑𝖆, bro. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like I want to play with you, but I have to play with 𝕊𝖑𝖆. And I literally just switched the tweet, �㐐𝖊𝖑𝖆 x 𝕊𝖑𝖆, shifty shafts all season.
You see, the playstyle and construction of �㐐𝖊𝖑𝖆 and Hen and 𝕊𝖑𝖆 and 𝕊𝑑𝖆 are relatively similar. 𝕐𝖊𝖑𝖆 and 𝕊𝖑𝖆 were both IGLs that were very height dominant, and Hen and 𝕊𝑑𝖆 were both really talented fraggers who knew how to play height as well. In my opinion, 𝕊𝑑𝖆 was an upgrade over Hen, and 𝕐𝖊𝖑𝖆 was an upgrade over 𝕊𝖑𝖆, essentially meshing the two best players from the previous 2 seasons FNCS champions. In their first season together, they showed truly how dominant they were in the duo cash cups, placing 6th, 2nd, 1st, and then another 2nd. These matches are lower level than an FNCS Grand Finals and are significantly easier to win, but repeated performances like this showed that they clearly had the capabilities to win the FNCS Grand Finals this season. However, come to the finals and yet again they fall short, ending up 3rd. You see, they were easily able to dominate the lower level cash cups, however in finals they weren't able to play this exact same playstyle as things were definitely different. This season they were only able to get 1 victory royale, and on average you're going to need 2.4, so somewhere between 2 and 3 wins to actually win the entire FNCS. Now this depends on playstyle, but since these are 2 height dominant players whose strategy largely revolves around winning games, the fact that they only got a single victory royale clearly showed that their game plan needed some work. A disappointing finish, just missing out on the championship title yet again, but the next season would be the FNCS Invitational, the first in-person event Fortnite has had in 3 years since the World Cup in 2019. One of the main reasons they were predicted to win is because there were minimal height teams in this lobby. If you looked at the player list, not many of these teams were really dominant height teams. The 2 main other contenders were 𝕊𝖑𝖆 and RiZen and 𝐴𝖭𝑠𝑛 and 𝐵𝐵𝑋. However, these 2 teams were fighting each other off spawn, resulting in them not being in every single endgame, opening up high ground for 𝕊𝑑𝖆 and 𝕐𝖊𝖑𝖆 to run away with it. But there's one thing that they hadn't counted on. One of Europe's best teams, 𝐾𝐴𝑚𝑖 and 𝐶𝑒TI, had been switching around their playstyle all year. Historically, in the endgame, they'd played low to mid ground layers and tried to dominate these. This is a great playstyle if you want to consistently get deep into endgames, however it's incredibly difficult to win games from this position. It was possible to win a tournament, but without a lot of massive point games, it was almost impossible to be consistent enough to win. They took a complete 180 on their entire playstyle and hired coach 𝕭𝖑𝖆 to teach them how to play height. Now equipped with a full package being able to play any layer in endgame, they dominated.
High ground was taken away by 𝐾𝐴𝑚𝑖 and 𝐶ETI. All they have to do is close out this game. 𝐶ETI trying to take control, trying to fight for the high ground, but it's not enough. 𝐾𝐴𝑚𝑖 and 𝐶ETI take their 4th victory royale.
𝕐𝖊𝖑𝖆 and 𝕊𝑑𝖆 had managed to keep up throughout the majority of the tournament, keeping them close behind in 2nd, but unfortunately we already know how this tournament ended. For teams like this, winning is all that matters, and the post-game interview says it all.
I mean, you must be very proud as well, 𝕊𝑑𝖆, of what you've achieved here at Invitational. No.
The next season was Chapter 4, and this remained duos, keeping 𝕐𝖊𝖑 and 𝕊𝑑𝖆 together. A top 2 placement in the FNCS's first major will qualify them for the Global Championships at the end of the year. You would think with the disappointment of the FNCS Invitational, combined with this opportunity to qualify, motivation would be at an all-time high, but it turned out that wasn't the case.
First of all, I didn't work hard enough that season, in my opinion. I hated the season so much with hammers, so like, in my head it was like, oh, I'm gonna get chopped, there's nothing I can do about it, so I didn't even bother. But I think if I played, we would have won that season easily. So I kind of got a reality check.
They were able to scrape a 4th place finish, however missing the qualification for the Global Championships. But after this FNCS, 𝕊𝑑𝖆 actually wanted to drop 𝕐𝖊𝖑𝖆 and to team up with 𝐾𝐴𝑚𝑖 instead. Once the news eventually got back to 𝕐𝖊𝑑𝖆, he realized he had been complacent in that previous season and had not put in the work required to win. In a complete parallel to 𝐾𝐴𝑚𝑖 and 𝐶ETI, the team that had just beat them at the FNCS Invitational, they hired coach 𝕭𝑑𝖆𝖆 to give them a game plan and to figure out how to truly play the Grand Finals. Throughout Fortnite Chapter 4 Season 2, 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 put in more work than is healthy or sustainable. This season's FNCS had a format that had 3 weeks. Based on your performances here would dictate if you either went through to the Grand Finals, if you came in the top 40, or if you came 41st down till 90th, you would go to the Surge Week, which was essentially a semi-finals. Across the 3 weeks, they placed 3rd, 1st, and 7th, meaning they were significantly ahead of everyone else on the series point leaderboard, skipping Surge Week and easily being the top team predicted to win this season's FNCS Grand Finals. The following 12 games were about to be the best performance in Fortnite history. The entire season they've been landing at 𝕭𝖃 Crossing. No one dared contest them.
That was the best spot.
Finals, 𝕭and 𝕭𝑑𝖑𝖆 end up landing to these houses on the left side here.
And I'm just talking to chat and saying that this was like literally the best place to land besides Mega City.
Cutting off a huge amount of their loot. For most teams, this would disadvantage you massively, but this almost seemed to give 𝕊𝖑𝖆 and �ㄎ𝑒ezy a boost. This was 𝕭 and 𝕭𝑑𝖑𝖆's first FNCS Grand Finals, so naturally they're a little bit nervous, and this is something that top teams can capitalize on. For reference, this is �ㄎ𝑒ezy's 15th FNCS Finals and 𝕊𝖑𝖆's 7th. All they did was grab a small amount of loot and disengage over to this west tower. However, this was a massive mistake. Once they've arrived here, they realized that Jalen was already holding an angle onto this area, which combined with �ㄎ𝑒ezy and 𝕊𝑑𝖆's quick push meant that they were completely pinched on a small island that they couldn't escape from. With minimal time investment, �ㄎ𝑒ezy and 𝕊𝑑𝖆 managed to pick up 2 easy eliminations. Now, since each elimination is worth 4 points in a Grand Finals setting, this was already a massive start for them, and they'd barely invested any ammo or time into this fight.
We didn't even want to kill them after that. We just sat there milking them every game.
But why was this team landing here? And more importantly, why is �ㄎ𝑒ezy and 𝕊𝑑𝖆 landing here? Well, 𝕭 and 𝕭𝑑𝖑𝖆 wanted to ensure that they could get kinetic blades, the only source of mobility this season, from the guaranteed spot to the south. The reasons are the same for 𝕎𝑒ezy and 𝕊𝑑𝖆, but they're much smarter. You see, the main building here has 10 kinetic blade spawns, and there are 2 different rarities of kinetic blades. The rare, which is blue, and the epic rarity, which is purple. Now, the purple has 3 charges, whereas the blue has 2, and with the large amount of kinetic blade spawns here, this gives them a higher chance of both of them having the purple variant. Now, if you look at distribution on the map, this is the only spot that has this amount of kinetic blade spawns, meaning they have a massive advantage. Now, you may not think one more charge is that big of an advantage, but when it comes to endgame, it absolutely is. With 5 eliminations and a 5th place finish in game number 1, they were in 3rd place. But it would be game 2 where the purple kinetic blades power would truly be shown. In Fortnite, there are 4 storm circles that move. The 9th, 10th, 11th, and the final one, the 12th. First moving zone, which is the 9th circle, �ㄎ𝑒ezy and 𝕊𝑑𝖆 can use the purple kinetic blades to travel the entire distance without even touching the floor. If they only had the blue, they would have to drain some materials boxing up halfway through this zone. And these materials are extremely important because they use these to actually tunnel a little bit deeper into the 10th zone. Now, the next moving zone continues to move in the exact same direction, and because they've tunneled this little bit deeper, they are now ahead of every other team. But why would you even bother wasting your materials to do this when you have kinetic blades to fly through the sky? Well, that's exactly the problem. Everyone at this moment is using their kinetic blades to fly through the sky. And this means there's a huge risk of you landing at the front side of zone, the side of zone, and another player landing on your head. So to avoid this, you need to be the last player to use your kinetic blades, which is why 𝕎𝑒ezy and 𝕊𝑑𝖆 stayed here, invested a little bit of materials, because all of the other players in the lobby are using their kinetic blades to fly. But since they've tunneled further into the zone, this means they have more time before the zone catches up to them, meaning they don't have to use their kinetic blades as quickly as everyone else. But there's another way in which this is genius. Because they're the last ones to use their kinetic blades, if they shoot out height right before they rotate, they ensure that not only are they the last team using their kinetic blades, they're the highest in the sky. But here's the real 𝕭𝖃 Crossing secret. Remember those 3 kinetic blade charges rather than the 2 that the majority of other players have in the lobby? Well, when you combine that with the timing of being the last one to use your kinetic blades, and the fact that you've just shot out high ground, this means that you're guaranteed to be the highest team in the lobby with no one above you, which means that when they fall down, they are always guaranteed to land on height with no one landing on them from above them. From then on, 𝕎𝑒ezy stays all the way up, and in the final moving zone, 𝕊𝑑𝖆 drops down to frag out and get the final few eliminations and clean up the first victory royale of the weekend. Despite winning this game, they're not actually in first place yet, as they're behind 𝕭𝑑𝖃 and 𝕭𝑚ixon by 1 single point. They were off to a great start, but that was about to all change. Game 3 would be their worst of the day. After 𝕊𝑑𝖆 goes down from an unfortunate fight in the mid game, they struggle with low materials in the end game, and after getting a refresh chip back zone just kind of died to the storm. Still, a 15th with 5 eliminations keeps them in second place. But this is when one of the most insane win streaks in Fortnite history was about to begin. In game 4, rather than the second moving zone continuing the same direction as the previous, it pulls back over itself. Since they were already...
For tomorrow, when you come with me to do the scare, do you want to go or no? Okay, we're not going to get paid. But it's fun. It's something we get to do together.
Okay.
So tomorrow, I'm going to have you wear my black cargos. We're going to rip them up, get them a little dirty. I'm going to get some, I want to try and get some blood to spray on you and make, like, you're going to be shirtless, okay?
Yeah.
We're going to make you look all dirty and bloody. We're going to do your face paint. You're going to have the mask on. You're going to look fucking hot. If any bitches go up to you, I want you to talk them in the face.
already on second height, and the team is just connected to them by a few walls. They can easily...
I'm wearing the dress and I'm getting all bloody and dirty. We're basically going to be like a couples, but we're going to be...
Like horror.
Yeah.
Chop this out. Given this is the start of the 10th zone, the exact same time that they took high ground in game number 2, 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆 can triple katana up into the sky and connect to some old builds, guaranteeing them height. Whilst 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆 stays up on high ground to secure the win with a heal off, 𝕊𝖏 drops down to disrupt the players below and wipes them all out of the lobby, securing their second victory royale of the tournament. With confidence high and the momentum rolling, they make aggressive plays in game number 5 to secure themselves a refresh on materials before the moving zones. However, they get overconfident and make a mistake. In the 9th zone, the first moving zone, they see no one is established on high ground, so they land on it to claim it, in the process using a ton of those materials they got earlier on. But remember, they usually take height in the 10th zone, and taking height this early means someone can use their own strategy of chopping them out against them. But don't count them out yet, they already know how to play against their own strategy. They land at the front side of the zone, and since they are the second highest team, height has built on top of them. This means that they can just edit them out and spray them as they're falling out of the sky. And when is this done? The start of the 10th zone, the exact same time they've claimed high ground in their other 2 wins. Since 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆 is using the shadow tracker, which by the way is insanely busted, this marks them, so then when 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆 uses his 3 kinetic blade charges to fly into the sky, he can easily find the player who's already weak, land on his head, and one pump him. Now this game does admittedly get a little bit messy, it's not as clean as the previous 2, but this time when 𝕊𝖏 goes down to frag, 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆 joins him as he has no heal off potential all the way up on high ground and wins the 2nd game in a row. Prior to the final game on day number 1, they were already 117 points ahead of 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖑𝖆 in second place, and a win in game 6 would almost put them in an unbeatable position coming into day number 2. They learned from their previous game. In the 9th zone, they shoot out the high ground team, but because they don't have 3 kinetic blade charges and too many players are kinetic blading through the sky, they do not try to retake high ground and instead just land at the front side of zone and create a bunch of space to work from. They tarp a little bit deeper into zone and set up for their classic high ground retake, but realize they're on a bad layer as there's too many players above them, so after spraying out the height team, decide to rotate only using a single kinetic blade charge. After staggering here for a little bit and letting the zone catch up, they use another single kinetic blade charge to land again at the front side of zone. As they've been doing this, they've slowly elevated to the point that they are now second high ground, meaning that, as you guessed it, yes, the height team has connected on top of their head, giving them the opportunity to chop them out. Now, since they've only been using a single kinetic blade charge on every rotate, at this point it's fully recharged, meaning they can triple blade straight up into the sky and, yes, guarantee be the highest again. But there is one problem. They have 0 eliminations so far, meaning there's been 0 points in this game where they've been able to get their materials refreshed. With this in mind, 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆 spots materials down in the backside of zone, and after popping a slurp juice, makes an extremely aggressive play to dive straight back down and pick up a bunch of them. He is spotted by other players at the backside of the zone, but the slurp juice he popped earlier keeps him alive, allowing him to get straight back up onto high ground. As always, 𝕊𝖏 drops down to frag out on the players down below, and it all comes down to a 2v2. 𝕊𝖏 and 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆 versus 𝐾𝐾AMI and 𝐶𝑒TI. 𝕊𝖏 hears them pop 6 chug splashes down below, which shows that they do not have anything to win the heal off with, meaning 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆 up on top just has to sit there and throw the chug splashes to win the game. However, 𝐶𝑒TI runs up from the backside of zone and gets a massive tag off onto 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆. Luckily, the slurp juice he has popped gives him enough HP just to win out this 1v1 as 𝐶𝑒TI goes down to the storm, giving 𝕊𝖊𝖑𝖆 and 𝕊𝖏 their 4th victory royale of the day, 3 of these being in a row. The most victory royales ever done in an FNCS, which included European players, was 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 and 𝐶𝑒𝑡𝑖 at the FNCS Invitational when they won 4, and the most in Europe itself is 3. 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 and 𝕊𝑑𝖆 have just won 4 with 6 games left to go. But this is where problems may arise. You see, across a 2-day event, teams often change up their strategies off spawn, meaning that Kenjutsu drop spot that they've had so easily on day number 1 may be a completely different story for them on day number 2. If they lose a bunch of games off of spawn, another team could easily overtake them on the leaderboards. Twitter didn't help. 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆, who was currently in 49th place, 1 away from the bottom after day number 1, replied, "Does he know?" in response to a potential drop map for day 2. Now, 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 landed at Kenjutsu Crossing earlier in a solo cash cup, a different tournament, so naturally 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 and 𝕊𝑑𝖆 began to think that he was going to contest them on day 2 and ruin their tournament. The nerves definitely got to 𝕊𝑑𝖆 as he ended up throwing up before game number 7.
But I know like Venom's gonna show up anyway, don't matter if he's nervous or not.
But not only did 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 not land here, 𝕭𝑊𝑘𝐼 and 𝕭𝑅𝑒 also left this area, leaving them the entire drop to themselves. 𝕭𝑊𝑘𝐼 was right. Nervous or not, 𝕊𝑑𝖆 put on an absolute fragging masterclass, picking up 8 eliminations by himself, making a grand finals lobby look like he's playing some pub zone wars match, and winning game number 7. At this point, there was a lot of criticism on the team, however. Most of the zones that they'd played well in were home zones, meaning the zones pooled near their drop spot of Kenjutsu Crossing. However, game 8 was a breakwater bay zone, which is the complete opposite corner of the map. And what do you know? Who wins the game? 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 and 𝕊𝑑𝖆. At this point, there's been 8 games played, and 6 of them have been won by 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 and 𝕊𝑑𝖆. They are over 200 points ahead of 𝑚𝑒RSTAche and 𝐶𝑒𝑖𝑛, who are in second, the current reigning FNCS champions. With 3 games remaining, they were tired, exhausted, and started to lose concentration, making a lot of stupid mistakes. But they had already won the tournament in the first 9 games. They didn't even need to play the last 3. This was undoubtedly the best performance in Fortnite competitive history, and Epic Games continually changing the meta actually was some of the reason that they were so successful.
Like the season before, like the Hammer season for example, you just grinded like the first month, you learn everything, and then you just like go AFK until grinds. But like this season kept switching and switching and switching, so it was really fun to actually.
The one thing about that season, chat, is that that season specifically, when me and John were playing that tournament, the tournaments for those seasons, it was nerve-wracking to the fucking point I was getting annoyed because we never got a hammer. We literally landed, I think, where the bowling alley was. There was a little area right there. We never got a single hammer. We opened up roughly around 20 to 10 chests. Out of those chests, out of the 10 games we played for a cash cup, we only got 8. No, not even 8. It was like 5 out of the possible for the 20 chests that we got.
Chat, when you post chat, when you post your protein dinner on Instagram and all the gym rats swipe up asking for the recipe.
No, come back.
Wait, I gotta take a picture of these fucking bitches.
But yeah, chat, that was the most annoying thing about it of that season. But the shadow bombs, I kid you not, chat, just getting pure shadow bombs for that season was super helpful, especially that we never got, when we got the shadow bomb perk, I was like, John, number 1 rule, let me open all the chests. If he got it, he's only the one that opened the chests. And we had like 6, 12.
Go.
And we just kept spamming them, using them to our advantage, using the glitch to constantly making the shadow bomb last forever. Until we had to box up
everything.
But of course, the strategy wouldn't be successful if it wasn't for their insane amount of hard work with Coach Bloodex. One of the main things they put into practice in scrims was ensuring every game was as realistic and as close to their playstyle in grand finals as possible.
We literally tried everything. We didn't go for island one game. We only did the rotates we know we're gonna do. We used the loadouts we're gonna use. We didn't play any SMGs, pistols. We only played red eyes. We just played like very like how you would play in grinds, because one of the mistakes we also had the season before was in cash cups. We used to run gold SMG only, you know? We didn't run the red eyes. So in grinds, when we had red eyes in height, we couldn't get a refresh. But like we literally had even Bloodex in the call. Like one of the games with like 555 last moving. He started screaming at us, split your mass, like you're not playing 555. And then we went to split match and we got post rifle in the front and we died.
Of course, coming first and winning this tournament not only means they're champions, it means they've qualified for the Global Championships at the end of the year, a $4 million in-person event in Copenhagen. Naturally, I asked 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 whether the grind they put in this season was sustainable for the next 6 months.
Next season, I think I'll put like definitely a lot of time, but I don't think I'd put as much as this season, just because like it's only the win factor, and for Copenhagen, like I'm putting 120%.
Oh, this one
hasn't changed from
this story was crazy.
Winning an FNCS major in Europe meant two things: $100,000 per player, and a ticket to the FNCS Global Championship. But one FNCS winner was denied both. His $100,000 gone. His entry to the Global Championships denied. But that wasn't all. 1 year later, his teammate was banned from entering the 2024 Global Championship. Somehow, after the loss of life-changing money and opportunities, he found a way back.
This is a story.
This is the story of how Fortnite's unluckiest player became a world champion. It's 2022 and a player named 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 is starting to make a name for himself on the Asia region. He's Russian, but unlike most Russian players who play the European servers, he is located in the east of Russia, so plays in Asia. Since he's pretty far away from Japan, his connection isn't great. It's around 40 ping, but that's enough for him to showcase his skills. Despite earning in the first week of the Solo World Cup qualifiers in 2019, it takes him over 2 years of progressing his skills to earn again, this time in a trio cash cup where he places first with new teammates 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 and 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆, his first tournament win. The winning formula is simple: send height every game and give 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 the mythic assault rifle. They win this tournament and keep this game plan going into the FNCS Grand Finals. In 6 out of the 12 games, they're able to take height, and 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 wins his first FNCS Championship title in the region of Asia. With the success 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 is having in the Asia region, he decides to move to Europe 1 year later. Asia is the 4th smallest region, and generally much less competitive, so by moving to the largest region, he opens himself up to much larger prize pool tournaments. Any pros who dominate these smaller regions have attempted this before, but pretty much all fail. Just because you can do well in a small region doesn't mean you can hang with the best of the best in Europe, but for 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆, this was not a problem. In his first 3 months in Europe, he earns $12,300, almost a third of his lifetime earnings up until that point. He is dominating the solo cash cups, winning 5 solo victory games in a row and setting an, at the time, a world record. No small region player has moved to Europe and shown this much potential before. With his teammate 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆, who also moved from Asia, they placed 9th in their first FNCS Grand Finals in EU. This could have been a much higher placement, as at the end of day 1 they were in 2nd place with a shot at winning the event, but unfortunately a team contested their drop spot on day 2 and they dropped down to 9th. But 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 gets put in an unfortunate scenario the next season. He and 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 aren't able to repeat that success and place 26th in the Chapter 4 Season 2 FNCS Finals. Despite moving regions, 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 decides to drop him and play with someone else. A difficult decision, but one he would not regret.
780 people.
𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 picks up 𝕭𝖊𝖑, another Russian player who's done well in FNCS, but
103.
top 5. Not many people had predicted this duo as well, but 𝕭𝖊𝖑's performance here cannot be understated enough. Across all players in this lobby, he had the most damage, most eliminations, best damage ratio, and the most damage dealt in zones 4 to 8 and 9 to 12. The servers this season were truly atrocious, but coming from a higher ping background, this is something that 𝕭𝖊𝖑 is used to.
This is the lowest player count I've ever seen in my entire life.
In fact, he and 𝕭𝖊𝖑 used it to their advantage. They landed at the eastern watchtower and were able to grab the mythic flapjack rifle from the vault here. By combining this with the heisted breacher shotgun obtained from the hollow chest in the same area, the amount of output that they had to the endgame was truly unmatched, because they could just destroy and spray through pretty much every single build in the laggy lobby. Not to be disrespectful to 𝕭𝖊𝖑, but by comparing his stats to 𝕭𝖊𝖑's, it's clear who the star of their team was. Winning this FNCS netted them $100,000 and a ticket to the FNCS Global Championship. Or so they thought.
All because of that, they lost 100 grand.
Due to the Russia-Ukraine war that started earlier that year, global restrictions and sanctions were put on Russia. For Fortnite players, this meant that Russia was added to the prize-restricted regions in the rulebook. This states that you are not eligible for, nor entitled to, win any prizes in connection with the event. Many Russian professional players worked around this by moving out of the country. 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖑𝖆 had managed to successfully claim his earnings from the FNCS since he had moved to Serbia. 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 thought he had also done all of the correct steps since he moved to Belarus, but his $100,000 earnings? Gone. His first place on the leaderboard? Removed. His and 𝕭𝖃𝖃's invitation to the FNCS Global Championship? Deleted. Despite moving out of Russia to compete, he still had bank accounts registered to Russia, and due to these sanctions, Epic Games were legally unable to pay him, which triggered his disqualification. The reason other Russian players like 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖃 were able to claim their earnings and get invited to the Global Championship is because they had set up new bank accounts outside of Russia and could get paid. And his bad luck doesn't just end there. The next FNCS at the start of 2024, 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖃 and 𝕭𝖃 would dud, placing 21st. When playing with 𝕭𝖃, 𝕭𝖊𝖃 was mainly the IGL. He'd make the calls and generally lead, but with his insane fighting skills and massive damage output, this is no position for him to be in. He should be focusing on getting eliminations and supporting his IGL. With 𝕭𝖊𝖃 showing clear talent, there were a lot more players interested in playing with him, specifically 𝕭𝖊𝖑, who had also just had a poor season, placing 25th. 𝕭𝖊𝖑 is a traditional IGL, but he also has some great fighting skills, so teaming him with 𝕭𝖊𝖃 would allow 𝕭𝖊𝖃 to focus much more on fragging. I asked 𝕭𝖊𝖃 last year why they decided to play together. He simply said, 𝕭𝖊𝖑 GOAT. So unsurprisingly, when they started to play together in 2024, they had immediate success by combining two of the region's most underrated talents. One of the main seasonal items in Chapter 4 Season 2 was the Wings of Icarus. They'd been removed for most of the season due to a bug where players were able to fly up to sky limit with them. However, when they were reintroduced, they were silently buffed. There were no tweets about this on the timeline, no patch notes from Epic Games, and not even any of the leakers or data miners had even noticed. But one team had noticed the buffs, and that was 𝕭𝖊𝖃 and 𝕭𝖊𝖑. Before the patch, it was very easy to take fall damage if you swapped to a weapon. Even worse, what?
Come here. Easy.
Okay.
Are you still hungry?
Yeah.
Sit. Ew.
Katana does not look like that.
wings had their own hitbox, making it insanely easy for you to die out of the sky. So because of this, most pro players thought this item was utterly useless. However, after the stealth buff of the item, the fall damage was removed. This means that you can fly up into the air and cancel the animation, propelling you forward if done under a ramp, or vertically if done against a wall. Since you were cancelling the animation, the wings no longer had that large hitbox, so you would no longer take fall damage, and that large hitbox was no longer there. This turned an item that everyone once thought was useless into one that absolutely defined the meta. 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 and 𝕭𝖑𝖆 were one of the very few teams who would even notice this buff,
No,
and since there were barely any other usable mobility items in the season, this gave them a huge lead and advantage. 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 and 𝕭𝖑𝖆 crafted a game plan that was entirely focused around using an item that everyone else thought was
Arcane?
Yes.
You've seen the anime?
No, but I know about it. Cause someone always brought it up.
Ooh.
Fucking stupid ass friends that always bring it up.
Does not look like, you don't look like Vi at all, my guy. Fuck up out of here, bro.
Happy Halloween, maybe.
Happy Halloween.
My favorite time of the year.
Mine too.
Chat, it's Halloween. Happy Halloween.
was utterly useless, and with this strategy, he won the FNCS Major in Europe, making this now 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆's third time winning an FNCS championship. More importantly, he was able to set up a bank account and actually receive the earnings from this win. But with the Fortnite LAN events returning every single year, Pro's main goals are no longer to win an FNCS Major on the region. Instead, it's to win a global championship, and of course, 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 was denied entry to this the year prior.
Holy shit.
So coming into the 2024 Global Championship, 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 and 𝕭𝖑𝖆 were top picks to do well after their impressive year. But again, bad luck would strike. 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 was able to get his travel visa to go to the United States to compete where the event was being held. However, this year his teammate 𝕭𝖑𝖆 had his request denied. He attempted twice to get his visa in Serbia, and then twice more in Poland, and all 4 requests were denied. 𝕭𝖑𝖆 could not get into the United States, which meant that 𝕭𝖊𝖑 was left with no duo and had to choose one of the backup players. His choice was Polish player 𝕊𝖆𝑑𝑘𝑔. Up until this point, 𝕊𝖆𝑑𝑘𝑔's best placement in an FNCS was 16th, so at the time, this was a bit of a downgrade from 𝕭𝖑𝖆, who he'd won FNCS with and then placed 3rd. The original plan with 𝕭𝖑𝖆 was to land at the Raft and then play for the Mythic and the Medallion. However, with 𝕊𝖆𝑑𝑘𝑔, they landed on the opposite side, grabbed enough loot, and then left. This lifted 𝕊𝖑𝖆 to get the Medallion and the Mythic 12 out of 12 games, and is probably one of competitive Fortnite's big what-ifs. What if 𝕭𝖑𝖆 had gotten his visa? Would they have contested and fought 𝕊𝖑𝖆, potentially leading to someone else winning the tournament? Or would they have just played the same game plan and potentially have performed better? 𝕭𝖊𝖑 and 𝕊𝖆𝑑𝑘𝑔 had an impressive top 10 finish, but many people wondered what could have been if he'd actually been able to play with 𝕭𝖑𝖆. For 2 years in a row, 𝕭𝖊𝖑 had an incredible year online, and then due to circumstances out of his own control, he hasn't been able to compete to his fullest at the biggest LAN stage. He was stripped of his $100,000, denied access to globals in 2023, then wasn't able to play with his teammates in 2024. But this was all about to change going into 2025. With the main game mode switching from duos to trios, 𝕭𝖊𝖑 originally wanted to play with 𝕭𝖑𝖆 and one more. The two had worked as a duo, so naturally sticking together for trios just makes sense. They picked up Moustache, and they were able to win the first trio cash cup, dropping 2 20 elimination games and 2 more double-digit elimination games on top of that. But something just wasn't clicking. Their fighting capabilities seemed unmatched, but their tournament results after this just weren't really up to scratch. So when the world's best IGL 𝕭𝖊𝖑 started looking for a team, it only made sense to switch up. And since 𝕭𝖑𝖆 was the IGL previously, 𝕭𝖊𝖑 decided to stop playing with him despite their insane success as a duo. 𝕭𝖊𝖑 was now locked in with 𝕭𝖊𝖑 and Moustache, and 𝕭𝖑𝖆 started to play with Pixie and Marius. Looking at results across the year of 2025, it would seem that 𝕭𝖑𝖆 got the better end of the deal. 3rd, 1st and 3rd in the 3 online FNCS majors in Europe. In comparison, 𝕭𝖊𝖑's team placed 4th, 5th and then 7th. Despite this, coming into the FNCS Global Championship, the vast majority of people predicted 𝕭𝖊𝖑's team to win it all. Coming into an event like this, picking a drop spot is arguably the most important decision a professional team can make across the whole tournament.
I already knew they were going to win.
𝕭𝖊𝖑, 𝕭𝖊𝖑 and Moustache decide to land at the Hive. When you look at this drop swap, most people think the main selling point here is the Queen.
Yeah.
By eliminating her, you get the mythic Wrecker Revolver,
I was
the
making
Surge
sure they
Medallion,
eat.
and 3 legendary slurps. This loot plays a big part in their strategy, but arguably this is the least important part of this drop. The meta for the entire year has been trading damage back with other teams, healing and then repeating in order to rack up Storm Surge damage. And the Hive couldn't be set up any better for this. On top of the 45 chests, there are 5 Hive stashes, which have a 100% chance of dropping a heal and a 50% chance of dropping 2. There's 4 Swarmer nests, and these have a 100% chance of dropping war heals. And then there are Bug Bombers, who have a 100% chance of dropping heals. So to trade surge damage, this drop saw has more heals than any other. Now the Hive has 2 main towers in the middle, and by boxing here, they have visibility here onto 3 teams surrounding them. Mr. Savage to the northeast, Muzz to the northwest, and Goofy to the west. With 3 different teams to surge trade with, Swizzy and Moustache's incredible aim, and more heals than anyone else in the lobby, they deal over 1500 damage before the 4th zone, meaning they don't have to worry about Storm Surge for the rest of the match. With this dealt with, a new problem arises. Where do they get their metal? The Hive is a great drop swap, however, it has almost no metal, and since Queasy, Swizzy, and Moustache are a very height-dominant team, they need metal. By playing the highest layer above everyone else in the moving zones, they use less materials rotating than the teams below, they have the best visibility to hit shots, and they don't have the risk of teams fighting them from every angle, so all they need to do is look down. It's not surprising that over 90% of tournament matches are won for the team on height, but in order to do this playstyle, you need max metal or you're just going to get chopped out from below. So how do Queasy, Swizzy, and Moustache deal with this? With the northwest 4th zone pool, it only makes sense to go to resistance base. This is in the corner of the map in the dead side of the zone, away from other players where they can safely farm. But the question is, how do they safely rotate there since they have to rotate past all of the teams they were previously trading with? Well, one important distinction about LAN events is that anonymous mode is forcibly turned off. Most players know roughly where other players around them are dropping, so when Queasy spots a fight northwest of them, and then he sees in the elimination feed that Sphinx is knocked, they know that those teams are fighting and are distracted, so they have a free rotate. They fizz crash pad and fly straight through the middle of the 2 teams, easily getting into resistance space where they can harvest their metal for the rest of their match. Whilst harvesting, Queasy builds a small brick base on top of the POI, which seems like a strange choice since it's only the 4th zone. This is very early. However, they're simply just playing the odds here. They put themselves in a good position in an early zone, build up, and if they pull the zones, they already have height. If not, well then it's not a waste, since they're already been doing this whilst refarming materials. And in this game, they do get lucky and pull the 5th and 6th zones, so they're already set up in the best position in the lobby because of their good planning. As we've already seen from Swizzy's first FNCS win in Asia 4 years ago, being on height with an assault rifle in hand is where Swizzy is at his best. With insane ARM, he's able to eliminate Poyo out of the sky for his first elimination of the tournament. Up until this point, they had some pretty good zone pulls which allowed them to stay on height, but that luck would change with a completely max stiffened 8th zone which pulled across water. Since Striker's team was already over there, they rotated early, but height had already been claimed, and there was no real way of taking it back without taking a massive risk, which forced the Swizzy team to play lower layers. But unfortunately, more bad luck would strike, as Moustache's floor is triple pickaxe in moving zones, and as he falls, the game automatically mantles him, and he can't plus a 4 to protect himself. At the exact same time, Tayson, Chicho, and Haris pre-edit him from the other side, and he is not. Swizzy acts fast and grabs the body to throw it back into the safety of his tower, but at that exact moment, Striker sprays the tops out from height, and Moustache's knocked body is thrown outside and on top of the tarp. He's then blocked because Swizzy, of course, has to protect the floor to protect himself. Despite losing Moustache early, Swizzy and Queasy were able to clutch up a top 4, putting them 6th place on the leaderboard. But they were just getting warmed up, and in game number 2, they would show the world why everyone was predicting them to win. The 7th zone pulls to the southwest of the 6th, so this forces all of the teams into the east side of this zone and leaves the dead side completely free. With the next zone pulling south towards the dead side, Swizzy's team can crash pad early and build up and take height. So why don't they?
I want to see where they're going.
Well, if they rotate here first, the amount of materials they'll have to use to build up will be a lot, which puts a lot of teams off from claiming height early. But the terrain here is actually what makes this tough. Since so many teams are rotating off this hill and most of them will be crash padding, if Queasy, Swizzy, and Moustache rotate here too early, they'll have so many teams crash padding onto their heads, and all those materials they used earlier will be wasted. Instead, they open an edit and look forwards and shoot players in the back who are rotating early. Not only does this weaken them, but it makes them lose confidence in being able to take height. Then, once a few teams have already rotated, they crash pad in late and build over everyone else, claiming height. So because the zone pulls into the dead side where no teams had already established height, and most teams have already rotating off of hills, their choice of a late rotation into a height claim here worked a charm since they were one of the last teams to rotate. Now taking height is one thing, but with 15 other teams who could at any time look up and chop you out, how do they manage to hold it for the entire of the rest of the game? In this meta, there's one thing that's incredibly important to look out for, and that's players using 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆. The animation of this is visible through builds, and teams using this are almost definitely going to hit a crash pad. 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 spots 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆's team fizzing in the backside of the zone and comms this to his teammates, who are now all aware that they're about to get landed on. To counter this, all 3 players are not carrying a sentinel pump, but instead they're all carrying wrecker revolvers. When 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆's team hits the crash pad and flies into the sky in an attempt to retake height, 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 and 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 already have their crosshairs aimed right at them, and 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 is wiped out of the sky. Now because they're at the backside of the zone, this is a problem. This zone is still pretty wide, so it's a long way to get to the other side, but if 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 just tarps all the way across, his builds will be weak, so he'll easily get chopped out by teams down below and they could lose height. So instead, he crash pads to the front side of the zone and then builds back up. 𝕭𝖊𝖑 and 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 can then single air across to him and just connect. This crash pad not only stops them from getting chopped out while tarping across, but it also now means that their household is now connected in 2 different places, making it significantly harder to get chopped out going forward. From then on, they show great height holding fundamentals by sticking entirely to the right side of the zone, which gives them the best right hand peaks to spray players down below. With everyone else in the lobby running out of materials, this is where they start to rack up a lot of elimination points. With height locked in and the final moving zone approaching, this is where 𝕭𝖊𝖑 and 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 drop down. 𝕭𝖊𝖑 drops first, staying right at the storm line to fight players at the back of the zone to ensure he doesn't get snuck up on.
Vanya dead.
It's a risky play, but he's able to get 3 eliminations, including his ex-teammate Vanya, before he gets knocked. With the final moving zone pulling uphill and 𝕭𝖊𝖑 still on height, the teams below get suffocated and are wiped out by the storm. With their first victory royale in the bag, they now overtake Canada and are firmly in first place. Now one thing I didn't mention about the Hive is the OXR rank gained from looting this area. You see, there are 2 bunkers that spawn on the map in the mid-game, and these have insanely broken loot for tournaments. They have 1 guaranteed exotic item, the best item in the loot pool, a ton of extra chests where you can get extra heals, tons of shield barrels, but also the entire bunker is made up of harvestable metal, which as we know, 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆's team desperately needs for their gameplay.
Okay, I'll let you walk.
However, in order to open the bunkers, you need to be OXR rank A. Now you start at rank C, but in order to get to rank A, you need 1700 points. You get 650 by
this is a
eliminating
bit
the queen,
weird.
but you also get points for destroying hive stashes, bug spawners, and eliminating bugs. On the flip side, each elimination is only worth 75 points, so if you don't land at a drop spot that has bug spawns and a queen, it's close to impossible to get the rank required to open either of the bunkers. Now there are 4 potential spawns for these bunkers, with 2 of them being chosen at random every game. But the version of the game that was played at the Global Championship is a bit of a strange one. Queens that spawn at the Hive and in Ranger's Ruin have a 100% spawn rate, but Demon's Debris' queen has a 50% chance of spawning there and a 50% chance of spawning at Dystopia City. This means that every game there's only really 3 teams who can get OXR rank A and then actually open the bunker. So after trading Surge off spawn in game number 3, 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆, 𝕭𝖊𝖑 and 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 rotate into the storm towards the bunker to the west. Here they find the exotic 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆, which is a 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 with 300 uses. But most importantly, it also heals them for white health, not just shield, which for a team playing Storm is very important. They harvest their metal here and then rotate east to the zone. However, once they arrive here, they find that the other bunker is completely unopened.
Come over here!
Go over there! No! No!
Why are you going there? No!
We sold chat. Of spawn crash pads into 𝕭𝖑𝖆's team in early game and they die. 𝕭𝖭𝖑's team, who gets the queen from Demon's Debris, ends up fighting in the storm, which basically means 𝕭𝖊𝖑, 𝕭𝖊𝖑, and 𝕭𝖊𝖑 are the only trio in the entire lobby who's actually able to open any of these bunkers, so they get both of the exotic items. On top of the fizz from the first bunker, they get the Eradicator OXR rifle from the second one, which is by far the most powerful weapon in the game. It deals 35 damage per shot, but after every successful shot, it increases the damage by 5, up to a maximum of 55 damage per bullet. After 10 seconds, this damage is then reset down to 35, and then this cycle repeats. Thing is, it's not just shooting players alone that will increase the damage. If you shoot NPCs or any player-built structure, this also will increase the damage. So anytime someone using this sprays at another player,
the fucker
it's
literally went the opposite
guaranteed to have a
direction.
55 damage per
And he
shot,
wasn't
because if
suppo-
they
oh
miss,
my God,
they'll
yeah,
still
we
increase the
sold.
damage by
We
shooting
fucking
builds
sold. We
instead.
can't do anything.
So, as you can imagine, in the hands of a player
We
like
fucking
Swizzy,
sold!
some of the
Because the
best assault rifle
fucking-
game in the game,
oh my
this
God!
is dangerous.
We sold because of that fucker just
The game
literally
goes
moving to a different
exactly the same as it
direction.
did in the previous
Why
game,
would he
which goes into
fucking
the dead side.
move?
However, this time, Queasy, Swizzy, and Murstache play this completely
Oh
differently.
my God, we
In game
sold
2,
because of
they
this
waited to
stupid
rotate late to
shit.
build over everyone's head, but in this game, they instantly fizz crash pad as soon as the 8th
All
zone
because
reveals
the
itself.
fucking
So why go
stupid
early
ground
this
warden
time
wanted
if
to
in
go the
previous
fucking
game
bottom
they
and not the
late?
top.
Well, in game 2, if you remember, teams are rotating off of that massive hill and could
can't make
easily
this up,
crash
you
pad on their
can't-
head. However, in game 3, this zone was relatively flat, so by crash padding into the front side early, they're able to freely claim height because they're not worried about another team landing on their head. The rest of this game plays out very similar to the previous. They look back for the fizz animation and this time get 2 elims onto Skull and Arc. Queasy then crashes to the front side and then builds up. They stay high enough in order not to get crashed on, but obviously teams below will try to make aggressive plays in order to retake height from you. And in this game, 𝕭𝖑𝖆 successfully steals height by desperately fizz crash padding up and building on top of their tarp. They've lost height. What do? Do they crank and build fight? Do they spray? Do they just give up height altogether and play lower layers? Well, remember the exotic Slapberry Fizz from the bunker earlier? They jump back into the storm and survive using this Flowberry Fizz and some Chug Splashes. And then since 𝕭𝖑𝖆 has built on top of their tar, they just edit it out and chop him out, claiming height back for themselves. The final zone then comes down to a 3v3 fight where nobody has any materials. Queasy and Murstache drop down to aim duel the opponents, whereas Swizzy drops down at the front on top of a hill, creating a full pinch onto the team down below, wiping them out. With their second win in a row, they are now on 298 points, which is 122 points ahead of second place. Now with this solid game plan working, why change it? In game 4, they get the bunker, the 8th zone pulls into the dead side, they crash pad early, and take height yet again. However, the location of this zone is key because it's on top of Foxy Floodgate. As the first moving zone pulls off of here and down below, many teams are forced to drop and get clustered and stuck underneath the rest of the lobby. Then, when the next zone pulls back up over this, so many teams have to crash pad back up, use a ton of materials, or just die. But for Queasy, Swizzy, and Murstache, who took height earlier,
No.
Hey. Unsurprisingly, from this position, they won a third game in a row and are now on almost double the points of second place. If you didn't understand their strategy yet, in Game 5, in the 8th zone, they're on height again. Now if you've noticed, they're really the only team doing this, and there's not really anyone else contesting their height. Sure, they make it really difficult for other teams to retake it from them, but if it's such a powerful strategy, why aren't more teams going for height in this tournament? Well, if you look at most FNCS winners from their regional majors, you'll see that the winners are nearly always very height-dominant teams. However, since the level of competition at an international LAN is much higher, a lot of the height teams from the smaller regions won't make it to endgame that often or with many materials. That means that there's only a handful of teams who will actually trend to playing height, and most of them are from the major regions. Across the entire event, there are really only a few teams who are playing for height. From Brazil, you had Strikers Trio, who played it in Game 1. From NA, you had Pete's Trio, Poyle's Trio, and then Canada's Trio. And then in EU, you have Swizzy's Trio, 𝕭𝖑𝖆's Trio, Perdoxy's Trio, and then 𝕭𝖆𝖆's Trio. Now, a lot of the teams were just doing very poorly across the whole event, or died off spawn, so they're not in any position to take height at all. And other teams have the same strat. So 𝕭𝖑𝖆's team, as an example, likes to take it early in the same way that Swizzy's team does, but Swizzy's team has been doing this every single game, forcing 𝕭𝖑𝖆's team to play the lower layers. However, the one team who really plays height completely differently is 𝕑𝖑𝖆, 𝕁𝖆, and 𝕭𝖑𝑥y. Rather than going for height early in the 8th zone, usually they play low to mid-ground layers and then layer up in the 11th or 12th zones and go for a retake. Now up until Game 5, they've had a pretty poor tournament so far, dying off spawn, so they haven't been in any position to go for height yet. But in Game 5, 𝕁𝖆 had a much more successful mid-game strategy where they're able to get a few refreshes and they're pretty stacked going into the moving zones. Since Swizzy and Murstache drop down to frag out in the final moving zone, 𝕑𝖆 scouts height and spots them as they fall. So knowing that Queasy is a solo up on height, he crash pads up and wins the height fight. Prior to this, everybody was talking about how 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆 could potentially break his own record of winning 6 out of 12 games in an FNCS Grand Finals. He did this with 𝕊𝖊𝖑, so it was only right that 𝕊𝖊𝖑 was the one to shut this down. Despite not winning the game, 𝕭𝖊𝖑𝖆, 𝐿𝑖Zen and 𝕭𝑒𝑟stache still placed second place, which increased their lead even more. The final game on day 1 was going exactly as you would imagine, but 𝕭𝑊𝑍's team decided to key King's Trio, who are rebooting in the storm, as this is some pretty free elimination points. However, they weren't the only trio with this idea, as 𝕭𝑊𝑍 third parties and gets an elimination for themselves. Now they're able to get the reboot onto 𝕭𝑊𝑍, but 𝕭𝑒𝑟stache is lost in the storm. Despite being a duo, they still managed to take height in the 8th zone as always, but unfortunately they were sprayed out by 𝕭𝑊𝑍, who then took height for themselves. This match from Fred, Chino and Pablo was incredibly impressive as they dropped a 19 elimination victory royale, but what went under the radar was 𝕭𝑊𝑍 and 𝐿𝑖Zen still being able to clutch up a top 5 as a duo by playing low ground. With 6 games over at the end of day 1, they had a total of 521 points and a 185-point lead ahead of Vanya's team in second. But the thing with a 2-day event is that there's 24 hours where players can watch the VODs and analyze their strategies and come up with counter strats. Since 𝕭𝑊𝑍 had such a massive lead, he was worried about being contested by one of the teams who wasn't doing well, like Peterbot's team. But coming into game number 7, most of the drop spots stayed exactly the same and they were completely fine. However, other teams had certainly seen the success that 𝕭𝑊𝑍 has had on height and are now looking to replicate that. Yet again, the 8th zone goes to the dead side, but at this moment 𝕭𝑊𝑍 is busy fighting another team to get their loot refresh. Since they're now not first to rotate, Canada's team does the exact same strategy and crash pads early, claiming it for themselves. Potentially, they studied 𝕭𝑊𝑍's winning strategy from the day before. However, they failed to pay attention to the teams using 𝕭𝑊𝑍, and 𝕭𝑊𝑍, 𝐿𝑖Zen and 𝕭𝑒𝑟stache are able to crash pad straight onto their head and take height for themselves. Canada drops and edits them out, but they build back up for a second time. The first game of day 2 is looking like a total repeat of day 1. Until they are landed on. Acorn, 𝕐𝑎𝑘, and 𝐴𝑔ERS intentionally spent some time in the storm using chug splashes so that when they use a fizz crash pad, they can just land directly on height from the backside of storm, and they'll never be able to predict it. At the same time, 𝕭𝑒𝑙𝑒𝑘𝑠's trio sprays out height from the front, and now all 3 teams are cranking and fighting for height. 𝕭𝑊𝑍 and 𝕭𝑊𝑍 are wiped out.